Time is now 6:30 p.m. and I will call this regular meeting of the Charter Revision Commission to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Matthew Radin is present. Linda Jardins.
Present.
June Gagne.
Present.
Cheryl Hurley.
Yep.
Christopher Lumpkins, absent. Colleen Lugaskis is absent. She notified me ahead of time. And Dan Kapsikevich, present. Item C, review and accept minutes of the October 24th, 2023 regular meeting. Minutes were distributed. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review. I will look for a motion to...
accept the minutes. I'll second.
Who has made a motion? Cheryl has seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Measure passes. Item D, discuss and act on charter revision suggestions for draft report. So I submitted or emailed out to everybody a list of the Board of Selectmen suggested revisions that we discussed at length at our previous meeting and that we have discussed in the meetings preceding that. We've received public input from a couple of hearings on as well. I took the liberty to adjust the question wording where we had discussed previously, where we felt there might be some clarity or just some change of verbiage. I know we had discussed items such as avoiding acronyms, making sure we spelled out any of those to avoid any possible confusion. And then I added in as well the questions regarding the terms, the term beginning date for the town clerk as well as the tax collectors. So none of this should be new information to anybody, having discussed this at length. What we would like to do tonight on the agenda is start discussing action on these questions to add to the draft report. We would like to have the beginning of the draft report available for the public hearing, the third and final public hearing that this commission will hold on December 4th. That is a Monday. That is, once, if motioned onto the draft report, that's not the end of that. The question can still be modified on the draft report. It can be removed, as you may have seen or experienced in previous charter revision commissions. At this time, if there are any additional questions or input for the Board of Selectmen suggested revisions listed in front of you, two quick questions I just wanted to put before the board, and this is the commission, is putting multiple questions into a single question. So I offer two examples in the listing here. Question number 8 has, shall the Agriculture Commission and the Conservation Commission be added to Chapter 7?
Yeah, let's not drag it out too much because too many questions and they're going to
Lose interest.
lose
So
interest.
that's one important consideration. There's also the train of thought that says the voters may wish to select each question individually, since you are talking about two different commissions. That's up for this commission to decide on how you'd like the question worded as added to the draft report. I offered the other example where I split the questions out for the town clerk and the tax collector's terms as separate questions. And that being that I know at our previous meeting there was a question raised of whether the merits of extending the town or changing the town clerk's term date are the same as what the tax collector's term date may be. So those are two questions that I think we should discuss as a commission before going too far forward. Is there any preference or anybody's thoughts other than Cheryl's?
Speaking ahead of time. I think combining the agriculture and the conservation one is fine. I mean, they're both commissions. Why separate them? I think it's more confusing. I mean, that's what they are, agriculture and conservation.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
saying agriculture and conservation commissions,
right.
plural, so. Instead of agriculture commission and, it just drags. It's easier, if we're gonna combine it.
Yeah,
And just to be clear, I'll direct this question to the first selectman. How we choose to word these questions is still subject to the attorney's review.
right, yeah.
And on that note, once the questions are reviewed by the attorney, and if there are changes that need to be made, does that come back to this commission to reword and reassign? So that would require potentially an additional meeting post this regular schedule?
When are your next meetings?
We have a public hearing on December 4th, and then a final scheduled regular meeting for Wednesday, December 13th.
I anticipate all your answers will be on December 4th. I've been working with the attorney already.
Okay. Okay. So, to go back to what I had said previously, just because it goes onto the draft report in this state does not mean that that's necessarily the final wording
Right.
of the question.
I agree, keeping them both in the same question, that's what I was going through that, and then I'll talk a little bit more. I am gonna recommend that you leave commission on both, because if you read it as agriculture and
They'll think it's
conservation,
one.
it's like a combined entity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
don't think you
and
can-
they're two separate,
So
right.
that's my
I agree.
recommendation there as is.
I agree.
At least for that one. The other one, Matt, in terms of, I did do a combination, I merged the two for the town clerk and the,
I would, I mean, they're both elected at the same time, they both go into office at the same time, why would you stagger them? One going in October or November and one going in January. I would think you'd have them both the same, and put them together.
that was my put.
Yeah, they both work together, so that's what I would think.
Thoughts on that, I don't know. I'm trying to, again, reduce we want as much,
Right.
But
acceptability.
it reduce the size of and flipping over with too many questions, they're gonna leave the bottom ones alone, you know?
Is somebody really gonna wanna separate the two, right? If you're going in there, you're gonna say, wait a minute, no, I really don't want the town clerk in that, but I can't see that scenario
I can't see
playing out.
that, I agree, yeah.
I believe there was one question that Colleen had mentioned previously regarding this, and that was just the financial impact of the questions for both the town clerk and the tax collector terms, because if approved, we would be moving these dates out just enough where there may be a need to pay somebody to be working if elected, and they would be unpaid for that training period. So on that basis, just to put the thought out there as well,
But
that could be a
the
consideration.
plus side is if you have somebody that's just walking in the door and doesn't know anything, you're gonna be paying out a lot more than you think in the long run because they don't know the job. You should have somebody there to train them, absolutely. I've walked into those jobs, you don't wanna do that.
I know we had some discussion and question about number 9, the Civil Preparedness Advisory Council. Was there any further questions or thoughts on that question while we have our selectmen present?
Do you really need to put that down as a question right now? Or are there more important things? That's all I'm concerned. And it looks confusing if somebody doesn't know the backstory and the reason why it's being removed. They have to really know. I think you're gonna wind up, it's gonna be a lost question.
Kevin, what's your thoughts on that?
I agree that it's probably one of the lower priority ones. However, for people who don't understand that process, that's been started in 1984, they've had only one meeting. 1984 was started,
You need to
and
explain it.
In 2007,
Because,
when I was in office, we tried to get a committee going to do it, and then I didn't get reelected, so it was only that one meeting that ever had minutes in the town clerk's office.
Is there any way on that question that you could put in parentheses, unactive since 19, put that in there?
yeah, explain it.
I don't think-
I don't think so.
I personally don't believe that it could be accomplished in that manner, but I do believe that, looking at the question again, if the question were to be expanded in its wording, to somehow include, under appointed boards and commissions, then that could add additional information that isn't, trying to sway the vote or one side or
One way
another.
or
It
the
is,
other.
the section 7-1 does list appointed boards and commissions, and it will be right there. So you can describe it as such, but any additional thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
why not leave it in? That's an important thing. I remember Sean Peterson even commented on it during that public meeting, and it got me thinking a little bit. Just because it hasn't been fulfilled or been enacted upon, there's a pretty
It's not
darn good
needed,
need for it, right? I even Googled it before coming in here, and it pulled up all these other towns within the state, other areas that are utilizing some aspect of it.
So if we leave it in, we just need to see if we can't revive it and get people that are involved.
I asked all 4 of the fire chiefs about it, fire marshal.
he wanted to get rid of it because it was already, now, he's only had one meeting that is called for in that particular.
If there's already like a meeting.
With safety.
Yeah, you
With
have a safety
safety
meeting that
We have a
measures.
safety meeting for all fire chiefs, fire marshal, EM services, and the town. And we talk about the issues quarterly.
So it's really not needed as far as a charter mandate, but do we want to get rid of it now? So I'm just trying to.
I do
find a
have
few
something else I'd like to
priorities.
bring up before we continue on with other items, and it's a larger issue. Do you think you're going to be able to get 1,600 people to come out to vote in March?
No. you have to have
So
a
that is,
campaign.
so while not listed as an agenda topic currently, I mean, it is part and parcel of the discussion here that I was going to bring up as consideration on the number of questions. And that's where we don't make the decision whether it's going to be a special election or at the regular election in November. But as Kevin shared at the previous meeting through the handout, the opinion of the attorney, as it seems to look, is that if a special election is held next year, we would need 15% of what the voter registrar list is of active voters in January 2024, which would round out to between that 1,400 to 1,700 number, where approximately half of what your municipal turnout has been over the last 4 or 5 cycles.
So the reality is, be better to wait.
We have roughly 10,500 registered voters. So if we're looking at those numbers, we're talking 1,575, 15 between there and, as long as they're still all registered, between 1,575 and 1,600 roughly. That's the task between this board and the town, to try to get those numbers out there for March. The problem is if you don't get that number, the 15%, then nothing passes.
Right.
See,
It's like.
And March is not exactly a great weather month
but
either.
then the only thing we're probably is the budget question of the 3 separated budgets.
Share the last, or one of the last times that on a national election, which is coming up in November, that's what it looks like for the questions that they had. You can see at the top of the page.
Like you fitted them in on the
That was a national.
ballot.
Saw Rob Simmons' name on there, so it must have been one.
If you can remember what we did as Board of Selectmen, we voted to hold off on starting this board until we were at that 16-month window, because they gave us the opportunity to hold off if we had to that November timeframe. It's still a decision to be made, but at least it gives you an option. And I've checked with the state already, we can finish our work and just wait until that date. Or, again, try to get it in the end of March to get those numbers up. I will look back for you and I'll get you some numbers on referendums, and they're not happy numbers. Those referendum numbers are going to be looking like 400 if you're lucky.
I was wondering if the referendum was going to be any better.
I think you could probably get around 1,000 at the most. And that still makes it so any question would fail.
Fair.
And that's probably with getting paperwork out, just explaining some of this and
Yep.
still be
There
done
would be,
in
there
the
there would
polls.
be, there would be additional costs.
There would be
It
additional
would need to be
costs to
treated
do
on, it would be treated as if it was a almost regular election.
Mm.
And
And I will say this, the work that you're doing is absolutely not going to go to waste if you wait till November, because you'll have it in place, and it can go forward. I wish our populace was more engaged, and they really understood what was happening. Finding people to get on boards and commissions and stuff. So, it's a decision to make, and I think that as long as we continue this pathway and have an understanding of what we might be up against, we have alternates. So you could go to November, you could do that if you wanted to.
now we've had two-page ballots. I mean, two separate pages. Not just the double-sided, but two pieces of paper that get submitted as one ballot at an election before. Are there notable logistical issues in
Yep.
the handling of ballots?
Yep.
when
With
it
these new
comes down to
machines,
that?
it's a little
I would
more
think so.
difficult. You're putting two pieces in.
So that is a consideration without explicitly making this a discussion for what we would prefer. It is something to bear in mind with the number of questions that would be added to the draft report. And again, I guess just to revisit some of the guardrails of the discussion, we can put, currently listed are 13 suggestions from the Board of Selectmen. All of those could go on. The Board of Selectmen would still have a final say over what they would like to pick and choose to proceed with. That could be a decision that is made, that ultimately is made for us. We can make the recommendations, right? That's what we're here to do, and to put together a final report of those recommendations. But the ultimate choice is still going to fall to the Board of Selectmen to decide what they would like to proceed with, to an election date of their choice. So something to bear in mind. I did have two quick questions about two questions on here for the first selectman. The first one, voting separately for annual operating budget, education budget, and capital budget. I know I mentioned in a conversation with you some questions about how we define in section 10.5C authorization on capital projects as being part of the operating budget, and just the placement of that line in that section.
Right.
Making sure that that's something that either can or will be changed or modified if question 1 is to be reaffirmed, to enable perfect transparency in what that line is referring to.
I did speak with the attorney on all of the items that are here and the red line version as well. A lot of the stuff in the red line version that was adding a charter or of this charter is no problems at all. The other issues that we had for the 12, 13 questions, we're trying to make sure what was proper and what wasn't. We've got it narrowed down to 12. And one of the things that I was almost getting by was the issue of the town clerk, town clerk and tax collector. But the problem is, did you realize that we've been doing this incorrectly for all these years? The state statute tells you that when they are supposed to turn over. 189A tells you that they are supposed to hold off until mid-January. So we haven't really been doing it right. However, what happened recently was the town clerk taking over only served out the remainder of that term up until that election cycle ended. So it had to be sworn in last night. So the rare occurrences of that, we're working on how to reword that, so that would be the 12th question in my mind. But there's other ones there I think will fit fine. And again, we're going over the red line and comparing it to what we have for an actual ballot.
So the 10.5C regarding the capital plan for the first question, that's under attorney review right now for further clarification. When do we anticipate, I know you mentioned by the third public hearing we would receive feedback on that?
Yep.
Okay. Because I do think that's one of the finer details to make sure we have ironed out as we review the questions, is understanding the scope of everything that is going to be impacted, or that might need an additional question if it's not going to be covered in the scope of what's put forward.
Right, the attorney and I spoke about this Sunday, and then we actually went through line by line on Monday. So we are working on it.
And then my second question, was regarding, on your printout here, it's question 11, regarding the tax due dates. I know we've received information from Karen about what the cost up front would be to update the computer system, and then what the additional cost of the notices and everything for issuing these to be due quarterly would be. But there was a question regarding any additional cost and timeline for updating that software. So we know, we have an idea of what the dollar cost might be one time, but how long would it take to get somebody who's able to do that?
Not long.
Okay.
No, other towns do it, which is, when I spoke to the attorney about that, he says a lot of other towns are doing that. So the software is there, the upgrades won't be that long to do, training is very minimal. So it is not a huge financial impact to the town. And in honesty, he had the same thoughts that you did and I did, which was, if the taxpayer is having a problem with a twice-a-year payment, and they get to the point where they can actually do it and spread it out to the 4 payments, it makes it much easier, and they're not going to be accruing interest. And by the way, interest is not 17% daily, it is by state statute, 1.5 monthly.
Karen had said it wasn't, she had already checked.
Yes, and I distributed a couple of communications from Karen.
Yeah, I was good with keeping that one on, we said the priorities, I had that as a high priority, based on the feedback that we
People were saying.
received, so,
Yeah.
you know, I thought that was a good rule.
And if they want to pay it twice, they can
That's
pay
right.
it twice, but
Right,
it gives other people the options.
That's right. I just got it, it's nice to hear from Kevin that other towns are starting to go to that.
Because people are struggling, people are struggling,
That
so.
that one just makes sense.
And then the other 2 notes I had here for the commission were whether everyone felt in alignment about capital improvement plan moniker. I know that it was referred to as program previously. We had discussed modifying the wording of that. So any thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, makes sense to use that word.
Was there anything other than that? Was there any clarification on it? It looked fairly,
I think the intent,
just the words, the verbiage.
Yeah, it was referred to one way in one thing, and yeah, so.
Good, I just wanted to get some clarification on that, to make sure it wasn't deeper than that. So, you know, I'm good.
It was just confusing, I think.
Recommendation is that throughout that charter, it uses those 3 words consistently. Don't break them out into plan or
Right,
improvement, right? Because then that gets confusing.
Yeah, correct.
keep
And
the-
people are thinking there's more than one.
Yeah, that's what.
and this does, you know, for a simple question, it is a little nuanced, because as you can see in the first question, capital budget, that is what it is referring to.
Yes.
So capital budget would be changing, capital improvement program. We have 2 or 3 or 4 terms of reference for what is a 5-year capital plan that this is referring to. So even in other questions that we have, what we are referring to is that capital plan, but it is referred to differently, such as capital budget or
So
5-year capital
should
plan.
we change that first one to say capital improvement plan?
Well, in the current charter, under the section, under 2-4, it refers to it as the capital budget. So that's how we would have to refer to it as, for purposes of clarity and consistency. But that would be where that red line version and the public's accessibility to it would be very important. Having gone through it, I know Kevin managed to highlight all of those references and show where that change would be. So you can see where if it's capital budget, it would be referred to differently, or capital improvement plan, it would be referred to differently. And having that available, I think, would be invaluable for someone who's seeking more information.
Mr. Chairman, can I add a piece to that? It's been reviewed by the attorney, he likes the idea of the capital improvement plan. Again, you have to reference it to what it is right now. Just for clarification, hopefully some people who would see this would understand it, but really I gave out a sheet on what capital improvement plan is. for the Plainfield Capital Improvement Plan. It's an advisory document intended to serve a number of purposes, including an attempt to plan all anticipated major expenditures for a 5-year period. In addition, it provides the town of Plainfield with a guide to be used by the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education for its annual budgeting process. Now, to that point, when you put something in for a 5-year capital plan, you're making a list of the items you'd like to be able to either put in your budget or at least look for grant monies. And therefore, if you take a look at the last page of the budget page, which is talking about fund balance, under fund balance you may have 5 or 6 or 7 things which are there that came from the capital plan to say that you'd like to actually purchase them with tax dollars. So that's what it's all about. There was one thing this year we're not able to accomplish, but I'm hoping maybe if we had money at the end of the year we could do, and that was an item for purchase for the highway department. So we do have a plan. If it's in the budget, if it mirrors into the budget in the fund balance area, that is something we will purchase. Otherwise, we're not purchasing, and maybe we don't have a good year. Maybe we'll have to put it into the next year for the ones that are not listed as purchases. So if you take that money from the fund balance, it's not really part of your budget as you're paying taxes on, because it's coming straight from the fund balance. So that's how it really works. It's an advisory list that if we put it onto the fund balance, it is something we'll purchase that year.
Now, Karen, an item can currently show up on a current year operating budget as presented for adoption and the 5-year capital plan,
Absolutely.
capital improvement plan?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, that's what it's all about. If you notice like year 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, I'll give you an example of what we've just done this year. This year, if you take a look at the budget, you'll see that they're looking for a highway truck. And it's going to be leased. So it's going to be up there for a couple of years at $100,000. That's why it's in there like that, like year 2 and year 3.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding the Board of Selectmen suggestions?
No, I'm good with the plan. I think that's a good definition. You know, it's, as you read through this and interpret it, that makes perfect sense. I started going through it when I'm talking about it, because I agree with this. Okay, it's in the budget, it's approved, or things like that. And I think that's where people get all confused and mixed up on, and just having that clarification is going to be super helpful. And then we'll have to do our part, of course, as a community and people that are involved in the town. So I'm good with that. Trying to remember all the other questions. Other questions I was all good with. Other than the prioritize if I had to drop some. I tried to keep this to that number 12, I think we have 12 slots in the full ballot. But this is a big, if you don't get the votes, it's a voters in there. So like that would have to be thought about, I don't know how you deal with that, yeah.
My only issue with waiting until, and I know we'll get more votes if we wait and follow November, is that we're still ending up with a problem with the budget.
That's the only one.
Voting on the
Yeah.
budget, that's the only one that I'm concerned of, because
one.
one fails and they all fail, you know?
Yep. The attorney just gave me something this morning. I haven't had a chance to really deeply read through it, and a rewording process for that exact same issue. So I will do some more research on it tomorrow and then share that with the chair, and if you want to disseminate that to the other members, we can talk about it first, just to make sure you think it's clear or not.
To be clear about what the attorney is viewing as far as the...
At first, the most important question.
Okay.
Yep, 2-4. Because that one there, it is kind of confusing with one thing that I wrote. 2 questions, 3 questions. So he's kind of giving more clarification of that with the way he wrote it.
Okay.
When we've had a referendum before on the budgets, what's the percentage that's come out for that? It has to, I mean, that's not a special election,
Nope.
so it doesn't have to be the 15%, right?
Well, if you look at the charter, it says 25.
Oh,
That's even
It-
worse.
And it's how, very simply how it works on the 25% for a budget referendum. annual budget referendum has to have 25% voters going to the polls for referendum. If not, and something fails, then you're supposed to go to a town meeting for all subsequent meetings after that.
Yeah,
Votes.
read that, yeah.
And that's one of the things we actually eliminated, I think it was question 5, trying to make it so that everything from that
Goes
point on
to-
goes to referendum.
Yes, yeah.
And I can see where that is an important issue because people can't always come out to vote,
Correct.
do multiple shifts.
Yeah.
Right.
It also included absentee ballot access as well as ASCII concerns as
Exactly.
well.
We had one year, I think, had a meeting at the, a budget pass at the, or at least an informational meeting at the high school. So we could go up to 1,000 people over there, that might help. But still, you're possibly, locking out some people who work multiple hours or different shifts.
And the elderly who do not like going out at night.
Right.
The people who are on the automatic, what do you call it, they're registered to receive their automatic
Oh,
ballot.
absentees, yes.
So that one is also, how do you do that in a 2-week window?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Nine.
So, yeah, and just get clarification on that, when it goes to referendum and you have the town budget go, you can't just keep going back and back and try and try and try. Did you say that it would kick to a town meeting in that case? Like, I'm just trying to understand the
Yep.
process.
Okay, the process is the first Monday it is in May, you have a public hearing. The public hearing is allowing every person in the public to come to the microphone and say, look, I want this, or I don't want that, or whatever it might be. Then the Board of Finance can make an adjustment based on what they see. I can give an example. Years ago, they tried eliminating the animal control and the fire marshal. And that room was packed with a line of people coming to the microphone. Eventually, they said, you know what, we'll leave them in. And, we dealt with whatever the votes came out at that time. So then, if you go from that, the way it's written in the charter, then you go to a referendum, the first one out. And if it fails, you immediately follow up that with another public hearing after the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education make adjustments to their budget, and they come forward, and it's done very quickly. It's very limited time you get that ballot out to the people who are homebound, so. That's gonna be a problem no matter what,
Okay,
but at least it gives an opportunity.
okay.
You have to put it in staff calls.
And as mentioned, part of that review is checking that 25% turnout
For the first one.
for the first one, because I believe that in your wording, you had mentioned that, we would be just continuously going to referendum if it were to fail. We're trying to avoid that going back to a town meeting.
Yes.
So the attorney will come back with the answer to that.
Yeah. We all wish we would have, again, more people coming out and participating in the town government. Unfortunately, we've had less than 25 almost every time. Do you remember the year there was a petition going out? It was a petition to bypass that less than 25 and instead of having it here, go back to referendum. The petition should, in my opinion, should have gone out, but it didn't. It really should be as much of the public can get access to the vote as possible. So I think it's a good idea of going to a referendum versus town meeting.
Depending on what the attorney's response on that issue would be, we could either modify, if we put question 5 under the draft report, the question could be modified, or an additional question could be put forward to achieve the desired impact put forth to the voters. The only other question that is not listed on here that I know was originally part of the Board of Selectmen recommendations but had fallen off in previous discussions is just the Section 2-1 composition, which states the legislative powers of the town shall be vested in the town meeting except as otherwise provided in this chapter. I don't think that there was any intent to change that. I think it was a clarification of the wording.
Chapter or charter?
Yep, or to replace chapter with charter.
Yep.
And possibly include reference to the Connecticut General Statutes.
Okay.
So my understanding of it, and I'll just put a sample statement of it, would be to modify section 2-1A to the legislative body of the town shall be the town meeting except as otherwise provided in this charter and the Connecticut general statutes.
That's a generic way of saying it, and I think that is something the attorney is looking into. Because if you start, again, if you start posting which Connecticut general statutes, it becomes very messy.
So if we were to drop something like the Connecticut general statutes at the end and just make it a clean reference to
Cover all.
charter, but also, in my example, changing the word powers to legislative body, because that is how it shows in the Connecticut general statutes that instruct how the towns can set up their governance. That was one potential question I did not type out and put on here, because it was not part of the previous suggestions, nor on the sample ballot, but I know that has been one that was discussed at public
Put
hearings.
it online.
Oh, well. Excellent.
Just for conversation.
So that's, I'll make mention of that following the rest of these questions here, if we wish to add that to the draft report. And I can definitely state it cleanly for the record as well.
Now, at the last meeting, right, Colleen was able to provide some examples.
Correct.
A lot of those said powers. Okay.
Yep, Colleen did
Okay.
great work on it, and I checked through some of them myself, and it's, powers is referenced almost as often as legislative body is for those town meeting setup, so.
Okay.
Whether or not there is a serious issue with misinterpretation, that's a matter of discussion, but for matters of clarity, that's how a question could be put forth to further clarify that section.
On that same topic with the typo in the grammar with chapter versus charter, what's the process for fixing the grammatical errors throughout? That's just one example, and I was wondering,
We can fix a bunch of them all in one shot.
okay,
Grammatical issues or typos like that are easily taken care of without having to have it as a question.
okay, no, excellent,
Otherwise, we'd be having,
Oh,
I guess
that would be,
the-
yeah.
yeah.
The one thing I would mention is that the use of the word chapter there, I don't have any way of proving that that's actually a typo. If you read through the chapter, you don't see any further elaboration on the subject, but I think generally a typo is fairly recognizable and self-evident, and not something that requires a nuanced discussion.
Okay.
The second that it does, I think it stops being a typo and is something that needs a little more thorough handling. We do have a section that outlines the first selectman as the chief executive officer, which is the other half of that handling of the town meeting style government. So we do have provisions in the town charter that elaborate on our governing structure, which are consistent with the general statutes. For this section specifically, it's really the use of the word powers, but more importantly, the mention of chapter as opposed to charter, where the rest of the info.
and the attorney looked at that and agreed that that is needs to be replaced with charter versus chapter, because he couldn't find anything else in that chapter that ties to it.
Are there any other questions or further discussion regarding these listed questions? Is there anything that that you would like to add to the list of considered questions for the draft report at this time that we have previously discussed that didn't originate with the Board of Selectmen?
Can we take out that section that says you need 25%?
We have a redraft of that whole section, and that is not going to be there, I hope.
Okay.
And I hope the public understands the need to get rid of that.
You need to,
Yeah,
yeah, that's.
And one day I really do, and I will say this publicly, I do hope the members of the residents, the public, understand that this charter, written in 1984, approved then, still has numbers which are from that era.
Yeah.
And we have tried twice and failed twice to properly educate the public on the numbers of $10,000 to $50,000 for something that's not in not in your budget. It has to go to a town meeting, and if it's over 50, then it has to go to referendum.
Yeah.
And God knows how many times in the last 4 years we've had to do that. But it costs all of us. I think if they just try to understand that and move the numbers up to what modern day numbers are, it would be helpful.
I know they voted it down
Yeah,
Like,
the same thing, like if
yeah.
you're gonna go a matching grant and $10,000 is required for your matching grant, those numbers are way out of whack. Almost everything you're gonna go for with a grant that has the word match in it will hit, and you have to go to a town meeting for it.
Yeah.
You wanna put it back on there? Try it?
I think we just kind of stick with what I'd like to, but
Two failed
Yeah, I
attempts
know.
is more than enough for me.
Well, I was thinking, why not put them all on there? Before I was thinking of reducing those, it was 13 questions, why not put them all on there?
I think-
Hopefully some will,
Yeah.
My suggestion would be, we still have a public hearing, we still have an additional meeting to make adjustments. We have feedback from the town attorney that is still pending. So this is by all means, as stated, a draft report. So there's the opportunity to add, subtract, adjust, amend. That's what this stage of the process is.
And I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Just know that I would like to have another one of this after, because look at how many questions we could come up with.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I agree there, and I think we talked about it at the last meeting, right, there's items we should park and lot, just effectively communicate to the new team or the blended team, and just carry this forward, right? And that list may grow, it may get reduced over time, but keeping that continuity, I think is very
And keep
important.
working, because there's so many little spaces that we have to, there's just too much to get done
In one
in one,
session.
yeah.
We'll have
So,
certain
but the
constraints.
continuity, yeah, they should keep right on going.
We only need to
Did you see
start at the
question
beginning.
5 on that list?
Shall all annual town budget votes go to referendum for approval?
Let me tell the public this. That came from one resident.
I can't.
And it resonated enough, so we're really thinking about doing that, and I think it would be a great idea. One resident threw that out to a message to me, saying,
Right.
this is something I'd like to see. And after thinking it through, she was right.
Mhm. Yeah, it eliminates an awful lot of people that are paying taxes here.
Yep.
So at this stage, what I would like to do is I will read off each of these and look for a motion to add to the draft report, per Robert's rules. If there is no motion to add to the draft report, I will give it the time. If there's no motion, nothing happens. I will proceed to the next question. As previously stated, you cannot have a negative motion in Robert's rules. So I will, if everyone is ready, I will start with question 1. I'll look for a motion to add question 1.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Shall the annual operating budget, education budget, and capital budget be 3 separate items to vote? And
Aye.
all opposed? Motion passes. Question 2, I'll look for a motion to add question 2. Shall the capital improvement plan be defined as such throughout the town charter?
Make a motion.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any additional discussion?
The only discussion I had about that one is to be super crisp on its phrase replacement, so that the voter, it's very clear. So I don't have my written copy here because it's electronic, but shall the capital improvement plan replace capital improvement?
Capital program.
Program
Yeah,
is the
right.
word. Just make it very crisp.
Policy.
Replace
I've
that.
already redlined it all.
I just want to make sure that this question to the voters is consistent, and maybe that part is still.
It's clearer now.
To make it clear.
So-
Yeah.
So the motion has been made and seconded.
I'll
Cheryl,
amend my motion.
you will amend your motion. All right, how would you like to restate your motion?
Go ahead, Dan.
I'll make the motion to,
One moment while we do that. All right, so you will rescind your motion?
Always then let Dan do that motion, he's changing
I'll
the
make a
word.
motion to amend the line item number 2, which is shall the capital improvement plan be defined as such throughout the town charter? Replace that with shall the capital improvement plan replace capital improvement project throughout the town charter?
rewritten.
I'll second this. Oh, you said?
No, no.
Okay,
Dan and Cheryl?
motion has been made by Dan stating shall the capital improvement plan replace capital improvement program as such throughout the town charter? Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Cheryl.
Cheryl seconded, okay. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I will look for a motion for question 3. Shall section 4-1B be clarified for the election process of the 7th member of the Board of Finance?
I'll make that motion to accept it, although I don't know how it's going to be worded either, so.
We have to wait for the,
Well, the
Well,
question,
accept
the
the idea.
question may still be worded as such. How that change ends up looking like in the wording of the section is what's
Well,
going to
no,
be
there has to be
supplemental.
a way to incorporate the election of the 7th member.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, Lynn, with the second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I will look for a motion for question 4 to add to the draft report. Shall section 2-5-5 be changed to increase from 10 to 30 days for printed circulation of new or modified ordinances?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I will look for a motion to add question 5 to the draft report. Shall all annual town budget votes go to referendum for approval?
I'll make
the
that.
motion.
Cheryl makes the motion.
I'll second.
June with the second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. I will look for a motion to add question 6 to the draft report. Shall section 5-6 and 8-3 of the town charter be modified to define the Water Pollution Control Authority as stated in Connecticut General Statute 7-246A?
On motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I will look for a motion to add question 7 to the draft
I'll
report.
make that motion.
Shall the pension board be added to chapter 5 in the town charter as 5-7 for the definition of the board? June Gagnon has made the motion.
I'll second.
Lynn has seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I will look for a motion to add question 8. Shall the Agriculture Commission and the Conservation Commission be added to Chapter 7 of the Town Charter for appointed boards and commissions? Lynn makes the motion. Dan with
I'm
the
waiting
second.
for you to say something, Dan.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I will look for a motion for question 9 to be added to the draft report. Shall the Civil Preparedness Advisory Council in section 7-1-B be removed from the town charter?
I'll make that motion.
Lynn
Second.
has made the motion, June has seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? June votes nay. Motion carries. We'll look for a motion for question 10 to be added to the draft report. Shall section 7-5-C be modified to include eligibility of a resident with any or no political party affiliation to fill a vacancy on an appointed board or commission after 30 days of vacancy if minority representation is not violated?
I have a question. How do you determine if the minority representation is violated?
So directly below in that section, there is, and this is actually guidance from
Oh,
the
you're talking about
general
the minority
statutes.
chart, the,
Minority representation, so
Yeah.
in 7-6, it gives you what the total, the max number of membership from a specific political party.
someone brought this
Can
up,
be.
that it's only, the parties, I don't know how you're gonna define the parties, you have Republican, Democrat, Libertarian,
That's
go
why,
on and on.
I guess that's why I would say any.
Any, okay,
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Second. Any additional discussion? And I would just like to note as a discussion point on this too, this pertains to appointed boards or
Yes,
commissions.
it
This would
is.
not be
Right,
elected
not
seats,
elected,
because
right.
the law is clear on that.
This is so we don't get clogged up, like, then we just can't find anybody.
All right, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Measure passes. We'll look for a motion to add question 11. Shall the tax due dates be changed to quarterly beginning the next fiscal year if approved? So Lynn with the motion, June with the second. All in, any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And now, I believe if I understood the sentiment of the commission before correctly, we would like to combine question 12 and 13. So I will state it as such. The question, as stated, will be, shall the town clerks and the tax collectors four-year elected term begin in January following the November election as stated in Connecticut General Statutes 9-189A. I will look for a motion to add that question, worded specifically, to the draft report.
I make a motion.
I'll second it.
Cheryl with the motion,
A second.
Lynn with the second.
I know, I know.
Did
He
you hear
didn't
me?
hear you. I heard you.
I got it in front of me.
You got
We can-
it.
I did
Okay,
hear
all right.
that. I saw, yes.
Who did we hear first?
Dan.
Dan, okay.
Cheryl.
I
Okay.
just want to make sure I don't
Okay.
mind the relations.
No, we can even play the video back.
Yep. That's why it's great to have it. All right. Motion has been made and seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And then I would like to add the one additional question regarding the section 2-1. The question, I will look for a motion to add the question, shall section 2-1 be modified to the legislative powers of the town shall be vested in the town meeting except as otherwise provided in this charter?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
It's a race.
June Gagnon has made the motion. The second was Dan. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Is there any other suggestions coming from, that we heard coming from the public, or anything else that we want to discuss as adding to the draft report at this time? Hearing none, I will move on to, was that a suggestive lean?
Well, we have an engaged member of the audience, I thought maybe.
Oh, public comment.
Well, public comment is the next one, but that would be after our defined action on the agenda. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item E, public comment. Is there anybody from the public which wishes to?
Yeah, I have two questions. I think, Art Gagnon, I think you answered one already. If we went to town referendum for every budget vote, we would eliminate the 25%, correct? I understood that right?
As brought to us under the suggested impact of that question, yes, that would be eliminated.
Okay. And we, well, that doesn't matter. we'll get to that in the public hearing anyway. And going back to the capital improvement plan versus program, you're gonna change the language, are you changing capital budget in, was it 2.4?
So yes, the understanding is it would be. The reason that it is worded
So
differently,
it would not say capital budget anymore.
it would change
so-
to capital improvement plan.
Are we voting on a plan then?
Yes, because it would be, my understanding is yes, because we have already in other sections of the charter stating that that plan is to be brought forward at the same time as the annual budget meeting referendum for a vote. So we would be voting on the annual operating budget, the education budget, and the capital improvement plan.
But
Only
then-
two of which would make up your actual
Budget.
mill rate setting budget,
Right.
which would be the annual operating budget and the education budget.
But we're leaving capital budget in that first question because
Correct.
that's how it's set up now, and then everything.
It's going to, yeah, but then it'll change to
Everything,
Correct.
yeah,
Yep.
plan.
yeah, right.
That was it.
I have a discussion on that, because I still have them both separate. Budget and plan to me are two separate things.
Hmm.
Right? You can still have a plan that's unfunded, right? But when it's in a budget, right, you approve the budget, not necessarily that you have an approved plan. Like, I can approve a plan all day long, it doesn't mean anything. So I want to be really cautious on that one, to be
That's-
honest with you.
The reason I bring it up is the veteran keeps coming up to me, saying, why do I have to vote on a plan? Why do I have to vote on that capital plan?
Right.
Right.
If it's not part of the budget, why is he voting on it? This is,
Yeah.
This is part of, that's actually
So I'm not there yet on that first question, replacing budget with plan. The other aspects where it's a program, that's what we voted on, and
Right.
that makes sense to me. You know, I haven't put much thought into that first one, but they're two separate things. And I don't want that to be confused again by replacing budget with plan, and somebody says, well, I'm just approving a plan. It doesn't mean anything. No, you approve the budget, and the plan going with it.
with me, it's
I don't
voting,
know.
voting on a
Yeah.
plan instead of a
It's a topic
budget.
of discussion because it's confusing.
yeah, and that's
Right.
why we
That's why
seek
we're trying
to,
That's,
that's why we seek to clarify because it appears as a bit of a misnomer as it appears in parts of our charter.
Right.
So the second question
better.
is to, the intent is to unify the reference term across everything to make that very clear. That, you know, this is what you were voting on, this is what it is, because it is referred to differently.
We've got to do a better job of explaining that the capital improvement plan, we have to put something in place in order to take advantage of grants that,
Yes.
you know, that are available. People, you know, don't realize that you have to apply for these grants. If you get it, fine. If you don't get it, then that doesn't go through.
Yeah, it definitely has some good.
Have you noticed in the last few years that we've been doing sidewalk projects over in Shepherdville? Take a look at the fund balance and take a look at the capital improvement plan, and you'll notice that we're trying to get as much as we can out of it, but we're still applying for grants. So if we know we're not gonna get a grant, we'll definitely put that number, like say $500,000 will go from that capital improvement plan, we'll also put into the fund balance section of the budget. So we're gonna have to make sure that we do that. And that's the best way I can explain it, because you'll see there's 3 years of it, because there's 3 phases of it.
Anyone else for public
I
comment?
think D, 2.4D, really confuses the issue in preparing and presenting the town budget. The Board of Finance will also prepare and present the capital budget. It will include a 5-year plan and provisions for voting on a capital
That's-
improvement
Change.
program.
So that
That's
would
so,
be-
Yeah.
Well, that
Yeah.
would be, the 5-year plan would also be
right, but yeah,
Good
okay.
change.
But if I'm not mistaken, I believe that is there as a result of a charter revision question.
Yep.
Because the process used to be different not so long ago, but we did revise that to be presented at the same time and meeting as the operating budget and the education budget. So I believe
D was changed?
D was added. I would have to go back to verify that, but I believe that was changed through ballot of the charter revision. I want to say 2021.
2021.
Yeah, I remember, it sounds vaguely familiar.
Good
Yeah.
example. It's a good example where it's separate.
Jenny Kopsakevich, 265 Jenny Road. I have 2 points. One was similar to Art Gagne's point regarding the 25%. Incredibly leery of that, especially in light of how hard we recently worked at our local elections and how 25% is an incredibly steep number to achieve. My second point is just always on semantics and language when we think about questions. So while I recognize that you have already voted to move, to recommend questions to the selectmen, I caution the final authors of the questions to make sure that someone who isn't as intimate with the details of the questions, to make sure that they are understandable by the public. And that's just more of a statement for the final authors as it appears on the ballot.
Thank you.
I think I heard someone just volunteering to be on the video to explain that to the public.
Perhaps.
I think I heard that too.
Anyone else for public comment this evening? Hearing none, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that